When you think about the Middle Ages, and especially the story of Jerusalem, there's one name that it looms over everything, and that's Salahuddin.
Right, right.
The
Yeah.
image we all have is, this brilliant victory, the Battle of Hattin, and then this incredibly merciful recapture of the city. It's a very clean, heroic story.
It is.
But if we only look at the rescue, we're skipping over this huge, painful history. I mean, almost 5 centuries. So the big, uncomfortable question we have to ask is, if Salahuddin was the hero who took Jerusalem back, how on earth did it fall in the first place?
And that's the whole story, isn't it? That gap in time.
Yeah.
That's where the whole structure of the Muslim world just eroded. So our mission today really is to define what made it so vulnerable. We're going way beyond the simple story of an external enemy. This is about internal failure.
Okay.
We need to look at those 4 centuries, roughly from 639 AD, when Umar ibn al-Khattab makes his glorious entrance, all the way up to around 1039. That timeline. That's the secret history. It's the story of decay that made the city a target for the First Crusade in 1095.
And based on the sources we're looking at, this isn't about one bad battle. It's a systemic breakdown. It's a deep dive into political neglect, this massive economic desperation in Europe, and these huge theological splits inside the Muslim world itself.
Exactly. And ultimately, it took leaders like Nur ad-Din and Salahuddin a full decade, just to stitch that community, that Ummah, back together before they could even think about winning a battle against the Crusaders.
So we're looking for the slow disease that allowed for the sudden collapse.
That's it perfectly. This wasn't a sudden defeat. It was a gradual decay exploited at the perfect moment.
Okay, let's unpack this. So let's start at the very beginning. The real foundation of Muslim rule in Jerusalem and Al-Quds. When Umar ibn al-Khattab enters the city in 639 AD, the sources all say this was a moment of incredible vision.
Yes.
It wasn't just a military takeover. He establishes this thing called the Omari Pact. What did that actually guarantee, and why was it so important?
Well, it was. It was a masterclass in how to govern. It guaranteed immediate and lasting stability. The Omari Pact gave unconditional assurances and protection to all the existing religious groups.
So Christians, Jews.
Christians and Jews specifically, their holy sites, their relics, their freedom to worship, all of it was protected. And that was critical because it immediately framed Jerusalem not as a prize of war, but as a place of protected coexistence under Islamic rule.
And the result was
Yeah.
prosperity. Jerusalem becomes this major hub for Islamic scholarship, for pilgrimage.
Right.
But the really significant thing the sources point out is that this system, this Omari guarantee, it stayed pretty much intact for hundreds of years. This was the norm right up until the Crusaders arrived and just shattered it.
That consistency is the benchmark, But the seeds of vulnerability, they were sown not too long after. And not because of ideology at first. It was a shift in political geography.
Okay, how so?
If you look at the 700s, the early 800s, the Umayyad Caliphate is in charge. Their capital is Damascus. So that entire region, Hashem, we'd call Syria, Palestine, Jordan today, it was the heart of the empire.
So being close to the capital meant you got attention. You got money.
Exactly. You see all this investment in infrastructure and architecture. Caliph Marwan famously builds the Dome of the Rock. Jerusalem was a priority. The center of gravity was right there.
But then comes the big shift.
Then comes the big shift. The Abbasid Caliphate takes over, and the political center of the entire Islamic world moves. It relocates all the way to Iraq.
To Baghdad.
To Baghdad. And the sources are clear. This wasn't necessarily a malicious move, but the consequences for that region, they were devastating over time.
It just sounds like administrative politics, though. I mean, surely the Abbasids still had control over the Levant. Was it just neglect?
It was a strategic choice based on where the population and the money was further east. But the cost to the Levant was huge. Trying to manage things, to send troops quickly from Baghdad to this now distant region, it was difficult. So over a couple of centuries, you naturally get less investment, less political focus, less development.
So the region gets starved of resources.
Starved of the political muscle and the money needed to maintain strong defenses and, local loyalty.
So the Abbasid shift basically turns the Levant into a remote backwater.
Yeah.
And a region that's no longer a priority, well, it becomes a target.
Yeah.
Which sets the stage for the next, much more damaging internal rupture.
And that rupture was fundamentally theological. It happens when the Fatimid Caliphate expands into Jerusalem around the 900s.
Right. And the sources call them an extreme sect of Shia thought. What does that mean exactly? Why were they seen as so disruptive?
Well, the Fatimids, or Al-Fatih, they were Ismaili Shia, and their theology was different. It had messianic elements that were just totally foreign to the local Sunni population who had lived under that Omari pact for centuries. They were seen as unorthodox, even by many mainstream Shia.
And so they come in and start changing things.
Immediately, they became this hated form of governance because they started chipping away at religious norms, promoting their own new doctrine. They were actively creating a deep internal divide.
And this all gets personified in their leader, al-Hakim by Amr Allah. The sources paint him as completely unhinged.
He took power as a kid, and his reign was just one shock after another. He gradually starts making claims of divinity. I mean, his title, al-Hakim by Amr Allah, it means the one who commands by his own will.
Not by God's will.
Exactly. It's a direct claim to being divine. His policies were erratic, changing year to year, creating total instability.
And then he does the one thing that gives his future enemies the perfect excuse. He desecrates the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
An act with global consequences. Umar had protected that church as a symbol of the Omari Pact, a symbol of respect. Al-Hakim damaging it. It just sends shockwaves through Europe. It ruptures relations with the Byzantines.
He's basically writing the script for the Crusades decades in advance.
He is. He's handing them their casus belli, their justification for war, on a silver platter. And he didn't stop there. He also banned the Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca.
Why?
He saw the Kaaba as, a rival spiritual center. It detracted from his own self-centered creed. He was isolating Jerusalem from the entire Muslim world.
And then he just vanishes.
Mysteriously disappeared in 1021.
Yeah.
We still don't know the circumstances of his death. He was later deified by some groups, like the Druze faith, that emerged from that period.
So after all that chaos, what happens?
There's a brief period of calm. In 1039, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is rebuilt. The Omari guarantee is sort of restored, but the damage was done. The city was fractured, unstable, and had broadcast its weakness to the world.
Which leads us right to the brink.
Right to the brink. And what's so fascinating here is the true nature of the Crusades was less about theology and more about opportunity. It was driven by that internal Muslim disunity we just talked about, meeting this crushing external force.
Which was Europe's economic collapse.
Exactly.
This part is just incredible. We're always taught the Crusades were about faith, but the sources make it so clear that 11th century Europe was basically in a state of systemic failure.
Oh, it was grim. You had massive resource shortages, constant famines, plagues, overpopulation. The feudal system was just buckling. And on top of it all, you had rampant corruption among the elites, so the wealth distribution was a disaster.
So the people in charge, the nobles, the church, they needed a solution. Fast.
Yeah.
And they couldn't fix things at home without risking a civil war.
So they needed a distraction and a religious justification. They had to package this desperate need for land, for treasure, for resources into a holy war.
It was basically an economic rescue mission disguised as a religious one.
A rescue mission to save Europe by pillaging the much wealthier, more stable Muslim world.
And the evidence for this is just overwhelming, isn't it? The sources point straight to the Fourth Crusade.
Yes. The Fourth Crusade is the smoking gun. They pretty much remove Jerusalem from the equation entirely.
And they attack Constantinople.
Constantinople, a Christian city. But it was the richest city in that part of the world. Why? Because the real goal wasn't pilgrimage, it was profit. It was about securing ports and treasure.
Venice, the Italian city-states.
Yeah.
They wanted those trade routes.
They wanted the ports in Hashem. Other states wanted access to Asia, to the Silk Road, to the spice trade. They felt cut off by the Muslim world. The call to war was a way to bring back prosperity by force.
So you have this massive external pressure building. But as powerful as it was, the sources say it never would have worked if the internal situation wasn't so bad. If the Muslim Ummah hadn't been in complete shambles.
There's this heartbreaking prophetic parallel in the sources. The idea that the Ummah wouldn't be destroyed by famine or an external enemy, but that their greatest misfortune would come from their own hands due to their own disunity.
And that's exactly what was happening.
It was a perfect storm of failure. You had three major power players, and none of them were talking to each other, let alone working together.
Who were they?
First, you have the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad. They were the spiritual head, but politically a total non-player, just a symbol with no real army. Second, you have the Fatimids in Egypt.
Ones we just talked about.
Right, the heterodox Shia dynasty that most of the Sunni world saw as heretical. And third, you have the Seljuks, the Turkish warlords in Iraq and Syria, who were powerful but were mostly busy fighting amongst themselves.
So instead of a unified front, you've got three competing powers all feuding with each other.
A divided, weakened, distracted Muslim world It was an open invitation for the Crusaders. That disunity is why a city as important as Jerusalem fell, and fell so quickly.
Which brings us to 1095. Pope Urban II gives his famous speech at Clermont, and the Crusades officially begin. But the language he uses, it's just so extreme. It's not just a call to arms.
No, it's the ultimate act of dehumanization. It's propaganda designed to give religious cover for any level of brutality. He calls Muslims a vile race, cursed and alien to God, a generation wholly given to the service of demons.
He's telling his audience that they're not fighting people, they're fighting monsters.
And that gives them moral license for anything. And look who he's recruiting. He's calling on robbers to become knights. He's basically emptying the prisons and mobilizing the most violent people in Europe.
And the incentives are huge.
Immense. You get full amnesty for any past crimes, all your debts are forgiven, and open spoils of war, whatever you can steal, is yours.
And then the ultimate prize.
Full redemption of all your sins when you killed the pagans. It's the perfect moral justification for a campaign of theft and violence.
And we see the result of that rhetoric almost immediately, don't we? Before they even get to Jerusalem. The Marat al-Numan massacre.
December 1098, the sources call it legendary. Legendary in the sense of evil.
The details are just stomach-churning.
It was an atrocity that shocked the world. They massacred around 30,000 civilians. Not soldiers, civilians. But the part that became infamous was the cannibalism.
And this wasn't out of starvation, was it?
No, it was a calculated act of psychological warfare. A way to show total, absolute domination. And the most shocking part is, we know this from their own chroniclers. Albert of the Franks wrote that their troops boiled pagan adults in cooking pots and devoured grilled children on skewers.
It's almost impossible to comprehend.
It shows you what happens when you combine desperation with absolute moral permission. And it sent a message to everyone in the Levant: these invaders have no limits.
And that horror sets the stage for the fall of Jerusalem. July 15th, 1099, and it only takes them 5 weeks.
Just 5 weeks, which tells you everything you need to know about the state of the Muslim world's defenses. It was a total failure of the Central Powers.
And the massacre that followed was indiscriminate.
Totally. The Jewish community, who had fought alongside the Muslims to defend the city, they were herded into their synagogues and burned alive. Eastern Christians, who weren't Catholic, were also targeted.
It was about conquest, not religious purity.
The death toll was staggering. Up to 70,000 Muslims killed inside Al-Aqsa Mosque alone. The total might be as high as 100,000 people murdered.
And we have that infamous quote from their own chronicler, Reynold of Aguilares.
The bloodbath quote. He wrote that in the temple, men rode in blood up to their knees and up to their horses' reins.
Oh, unimaginable.
They destroyed everything. And for the next 90 years, the Muslim call to prayer was silenced in Jerusalem. It was a period of just profound darkness, but it was also the moment that forged the resistance.
So out of this total disaster, someone has to step up. The power vacuum is complete.
And that's where the story of the comeback begins. But it doesn't start with immediate revenge. It starts with slow, methodical rebuilding. Imad ad-Din Zengi, the father, he fought back a bit in Iraq, but then he was assassinated. It was his son, Nur ad-Din, who took over in Syria, in Asham, who understood what needed to be done.
He realized the problem wasn't just military.
Exactly. It was deeper, it was structural, it was spiritual, it was intellectual.
And he becomes this boogeyman to the Crusaders,
Yeah.
right? A really tough opponent. But if he saw the problem as spiritual, what was his strategy? How do you even begin to fix centuries of decay?
You go back to the root: education, knowledge, ilm. He established over 40 madaris, these formal religious schools, all across Syria.
These weren't just for theology, though.
No, they were designed to reteach sound governance, religious discipline, to build a new generation of leaders. He even made religious training mandatory for his warriors. Many of his top generals were Hufaz. They had memorized the Quran.
So he's trying to reverse the damage done by the Fatimids and the political neglect.
He's systematically rebuilding the Ummah from the inside out. It's a total societal overhaul. And his commitment to this is perfectly symbolized by one incredible act.
The minbar.
The pulpit.
Right. He commissions the construction of this magnificent, ornate minbar, but it comes with a condition. It will only be placed in Al-Aqsa Mosque after Jerusalem is retaken.
The psychological power of that is immense.
It's genius, isn't it? He's preparing this sacred relic, which took years to build before the victory is even in sight. He's telling his people that the return is inevitable, that the struggle is worth it. It's a physical promise.
And what's so powerful about that story is that he never saw it happen. He never took Jerusalem in his lifetime.
No, he didn't. And if you just look at that, you might call him a political failure. But that's missing the point entirely. His real victory was embedding the idea of Al-Qaeda back into the hearts and minds of the next generation.
He laid the foundation.
He was the one who transmitted the light. He created the unity and the intellectual capital that would make the final victory possible. And that light, that torch, gets passed to his student, the man who would finish the job, Salahuddin.
Born Yusuf ibn Ayyub. Salahuddin, the righteousness of the faith, was a title he earned.
And his background is important here. He wasn't an Arab, he was a Kurd. The cause was bigger than ethnicity.
Absolutely. And that's significant because later, some Europeans couldn't accept his greatness. They actually invented stories that he must have had a European mother because they couldn't imagine a barbarian being so brilliant.
His life started in turmoil, too. The sources say his mother drank she was carrying a sword, and on the day he was born,
He became a refugee. On day one, his father was expelled from their town to Tikrit and had to flee to Mosul. His entire life was defined by struggle from the very beginning.
he grows up in Damascus, in this environment that's intensely anti-Crusader, but also defeatist. There's this feeling that the Crusaders are just too strong to be beaten.
Right. And overcoming that psychological hurdle was just as important as winning any battle. His education was key. He grew up around the Umayyad Mosque, memorized the Quran, mastered Islamic law.
He becomes the ultimate warrior scholar.
He did. He learned military arts, diplomacy, astronomy, philosophy. He was inspired by the story of Umar, and he was this incredible student of Nur ad-Din who saw something special in him and mentored him personally.
And he becomes a soldier at 14.
Under his uncle, Shirkuh. And this all leads to the big moment, the Egyptian campaign in 1164. Salahuddin is put in command to go and engage Egypt.
Which at the time was the biggest superpower in the region, but it was still under the Fatimids.
Right. And Nur ad-Din's strategy was brilliant. He knew he couldn't just attack them head-on. That would start a huge Muslim civil war. So he decided to build influence from within their own government.
So his uncle Shirkuh becomes the wazir, the chief minister.
And when Shirkuh dies, Salahuddin inherits that incredibly powerful position. And from there, he starts his slow, patient takeover.
He doesn't just dismantle the state, though. He builds his own foundation underneath it first, right?
Exactly like his mentor. He builds universities, madaris, all over Egypt. He focuses on training a new generation of scholars and administrators loyal to the Sunni creed. He even increases the wages of teachers to show how much he valued it.
And politically.
He becomes a great speaker. He survives multiple assassination attempts, and he starts making these slow, symbolic changes. He alters the call to prayer, the adhan, and then after the last Fatimid ruler dies,
He makes his move.
a quiet one. In the official Friday sermon, the khutbah, he just omits the ruler's name. It was a symbolic transfer of allegiance to the Abbasid Caliph in Baghdad, and just like that, after 2 centuries, the Fatimid dynasty was over, without a war.
And at the same time, he's taking control of the economy.
He secures the Hajj routes, which earns him huge popularity. He becomes known as the defender of the Hajj. Then he captures Yemen, which gives him control of the Red Sea ports. The economy just explodes with wealth. And he does all of this massive consolidation, in just 3 years.
The speed of his rise is incredible. So much so that the sources say a war was brewing between him and his mentor, Nur ad-Din.
It was a very real danger. The Crusaders would have loved it, but it never happened. Nur ad-Din died of natural causes in 1174.
Which, as sad as it was, allowed Salahuddin to unify their forces without a fight.
Yes. He absorbs the Zenid Empire, marries Nur ad-Din's widow to consolidate power, and forms the Ayyubid dynasty. He's now the Sultan of Egypt and Syria, with legitimacy from Baghdad.
And his strategy was all about patience.
All about patience. He knew he had to unify the Muslims first. Jerusalem could wait. This unification process took him a full decade. He wasn't rushing.
But it wasn't a smooth decade. There was a major setback in 1177.
A huge one. He thought the Crusaders were weak. Their king, Baldwin IV, had leprosy, so he launched an attack on Jerusalem, and he was defeated, badly. His army was cut off, and he barely escaped with his life.
And it's so important to cover that. He wasn't invincible.
Not at all. But great leaders are defined by how they respond to defeat. He was beaten, but he wasn't broken. He went back, regrouped, learned from his mistakes.
His focus was just absolute. There's that story about him never smiling.
Right. Someone asked him, "You rule all this land, why don't you smile?" And he said, "How could I smile when Bet Maqdis Jerusalem is under Crusader occupation?"
His dedication was total.
2 years later, he gets his revenge, defeats a huge Crusader army, and forces a truce. He uses that time to consolidate even more. But the peace is broken by one man.
The ultimate villain, Reynold of Chatillon.
This guy. He was stationed at Karek, a fortress right on the Hajj route. And despite the truce, he just kept attacking pilgrims, killing them, taking them hostage, stealing everything.
And his hatred was on another level. He declared he was going to destroy the Kaaba and dig up the Prophet's body in Medina.
It was pure, calculated blasphemy, and this wasn't an empty threat. Nur ad-Din had actually foiled an earlier plot by Reynold to do exactly that.
So when Reynold breaks another truce and attacks more pilgrims, that's the final straw for Salahuddin.
It is. He swears an oath to Allah that he will kill Reynold with his own hand. The moral justification for war was now undeniable.
So he prepares for the final battle. But he doesn't just march on Jerusalem. He's smarter than that.
He's a genius. He starts by patiently capturing all the smaller forts around the main Crusader army Beirut, Acre slowly tightening the noose.
And he uses psychological warfare.
Constantly. Small groups of archers would harass their camps at night so they couldn't sleep. He poisoned wells along their path. He was wearing them down physically and mentally before the battle even started.
Which brings us to the Battle of Hattin, July 1187.
The final showdown. And Salahuddin's victory was a combination of military skill and just brilliant use of the environment.
The archers were key. They rained down so many arrows that the Crusader army was pinned down, couldn't move.
And then came the masterstroke. Salahuddin knew they were short on water. It's the middle of summer. So he sets the dry grass on fire and the wind blows the smoke and heat right onto them. It was devastating. They panicked.
And the final blow to their morale.
He captures the true cross, the relic they carried into battle that they believed made them invincible. Once that was gone, they broke.
And Salahuddin fulfills his vow. He personally executes Reynold.
The promise was kept. The path to Jerusalem was now open.
And that entry into the city is it's the stuff of legend. He lays siege for only 6 days, and he enters on October 2nd, 1187, a very symbolic date.
Incredibly symbolic. It was the 27th of Rajab, the anniversary of the Prophet's miraculous night journey. The spiritual significance was immense.
And the contrast between how he took the city and how the Crusaders took it couldn't be more stark.
Night and day. After all the horrors the Crusaders committed, the cannibalism, the massacre, Salahuddin lived up to his name. He was all mercy.
He offered safe passage to everyone. He protected their holy sites.
Exactly. The Christian women who had shaved their heads, expecting the worst, he assured them they were safe. He was basically reestablishing the Omari Pact. He was showing the world, this is who we are not you.
And then, that beautiful moment of closure, the minbar that Nur ad-Din had commissioned 2 decades earlier.
It was finally installed in Al-Aqsa. The dream was finally real.
But the fight wasn't over. This victory just provoked an even bigger response. The Third Crusade.
Massive armies, led by the great kings of Europe like Richard the Lionheart. But Salahuddin was relentless. He defended the coast, the forts. Richard himself had to admit, as long as Salahuddin is in Jerusalem, it will never be taken.
We know so much about his character because his life was documented so closely by his biographer, Ibn Shaddad.
Yes, who was also his general and confidant. And he confirms Salahuddin's incredible piety. He never missed a prayer, even in the middle of a battle. He prayed deep into the night when things were at their worst.
And his selflessness was absolute. He never had enough money to be required to pay zakat, the charity tax.
Because he gave everything away. He never enriched himself. His entire life was the cause. In fact, he was so busy fighting, he never even got the chance to perform the Hajj himself.
He died so young, at 56, from a fever.
After surviving countless battles and assassination attempts, he dies peacefully in his bed in Damascus. And when he died, they searched his estate. They found 1 gold coin and 47 silver pieces.
Not even enough to pay for his funeral.
A sultan of a vast empire died a pauper. It tells you everything you need to know about the man.
He was buried next to his mentor, Nur ad-Din.
Right where he belonged. And he was buried with his sword. His companions said, "You will lean on this into paradise." From birth to death, he was a warrior.
And that legacy is so powerful, it's still a point of conflict today. That story from 1920 with the French general.
Enrique Goro. He marched into Damascus, walked to Salahuddin's tomb, kicked it, and said, "Wake up, Salahuddin, I'm here."
It's just such a potent symbol.
It symbolizes the whole enduring struggle, doesn't it? The reason his memory is still so provocative and so beloved.
So, reflecting on this whole deep dive, I think the most surprising thing is understanding the real drivers of the Crusades.
Yeah.
The economic desperation, the state-sanctioned theft disguised as piety. And you have to contrast that with the sheer brutality of it. That massacre at Marad al-Numan, it's a true low point in human history.
It is, and that savagery is the dark backdrop that makes Salahuddin's mercy shine so brightly. But the final point, the most important one, I think, is that he wasn't some singular savior who appeared out of nowhere.
No.
His success was the result of 2 generations of sincere hard work. The intellectual revival started by Nur ad-Din, combined with Salahuddin's own relentless effort, his patience, his perseverance through defeat. Miraculous victory only comes through sincere, painstaking preparation.
He earned it. He was born carrying a sword, buried with a sword.
Yeah.
The whole life was the battlefield. And you have Nur ad-Din preparing that beautiful pulpit for a victory he never saw, and Salahuddin dying too poor to pay for his own burial. They gave everything for this cause of restoration and peace. So, given that their lives were so consumed by that struggle that they never got a moment of personal rest, it leaves you with a question. What kind of dress? What kind of sincere internal preparation must we prepare today for that inevitable day of ultimate victory and real lasting peace? That's the question you have to sit with.
Indeed. What are you preparing today?